weary or faint-hearted. So, thinking about today's message, all I was really thinking about for prep for this was how, as we said earlier, Pastor Todd was out up north running Grandma's half marathon, and that got me reminiscing about some of my running experience. As some of you know, a couple years back, I did the Twin Cities Marathon, which was a really great experience. And thinking back on that experience, I think there were two big lessons I remember from it. One is that if you're a runner and you've done some big race like a half marathon or a 10K, you're going to take any opportunity you can to talk about it and tell other people about it. So that's what I'm doing right now. And two, the other lesson is that running is hard. Neither of those things, I think, are really big surprises for anybody, for those that have experienced it or not. But I do know that running can be challenging, especially when you have a long-distance race of some type, because in the moment, all you're really thinking about is how much your legs are sore, your feet hurt, you're out of breath, and your lungs are on fire. And that's just while you're actually running. Then there's all the training that goes into it as well. There's the early morning runs, the strict diet, the financial burden of making sure you have the proper gear and supplements to make sure that you are taking care of all your nutrition. It can be a lot. And when you're focusing on any of those small details that, cause discomfort or pain or just inconvenience, it's really easy to just want to give up. You start asking yourself questions about, why am I actually wanting to run? Why am I doing this race? But when you think more of the big picture, not just the small details, but you have a big picture mindset, that can change things, which leads me to the question I was thinking about when I was going through this with myself, is what is the big picture? What's the big picture in running when you're in a big race? I think the big picture in running is the fact that you know that there's the finish line. And when you cross that finish line, there's going to be satisfaction, celebration, a sense that you accomplished what you set out to do, and perhaps some glory and honor as well if there's other people cheering you on, which is also another great benefit. And you know that if you don't cross that finish line, if you decide to just give up, you're not going to have any of those things. And everything you put your work into to train and to work hard is going to be for nothing. So we know what the finish line is, so you have to work as hard as you can to get there. And how do you do that? You know that every single step you take, no matter how painful or tiring or how uncomfortable, every single step you take is one step closer to that finish line. So that's the big picture. It's knowing what the finish line is. You're trying to get to the finish line. That's your goal. That's your objective. And every single step you take forward is one step closer to that finish line. When you have that kind of mindset, you start to not think about all the little discomforts and struggles that you go through. I think this is also true in other aspects of our lives, not just in athletic endeavors and running and things such as that. I think it's also true in other areas. Let's say at work, you're putting in a lot of extra hours. You're trying to get that big promotion. You're trying to prove to your boss that you can handle extra responsibilities. That can easily lead to burnout. It's those longer hours, and it's easy to get tired and want to give up. Or maybe at home, you're going through this big kitchen renovation because you're just excited to update your kitchen and make it a really cool place. But for the past 2 weeks, your kitchen has been unusable because the cabinets haven't come in yet. In both those situations, it's easy to feel discouraged, distressed, and want to just go back to what you were doing before you put in all this work because you're tired, you're uncomfortable, you're stressed out. But with both of those, when you have the big picture mindset, you're thinking about what's to come, you can get through almost anything. At work, when you know that the reason you're putting in those extra hours and working extra hard is so you can get that big promotion, so you can better provide for your family and for your household, well, that makes all the extra hours worth it. They make them bearable. At home, when you look forward to knowing that you're going to have a really beautiful new kitchen that is better for hosting and entertaining family and friends, you get excited about that, and it pushes you forward. It's amazing when you have this big picture mindset what you can do. And again, back off like running and races and athletics, that got me through my marathon, and it probably got Todd through his half marathon. But there are people that do even bigger things, people that do ultra marathons that are like 100 miles long. And some crazy people decide that they want to bike 1,700 miles. Some of them are in this room right now. I don't know about that. But when we have that big picture approach, it's amazing what we are able to accomplish because we're not focusing on the nitty-gritty, the small things that lead to discomfort. One other area where I think this is true, and this is where I'm trying to go with this message, is that it's also true in our spiritual faith walks, in our spiritual lives, because I know that we all have different struggles that we deal with in our spiritual lives. And that brings me to my next question, which is, what is one thing that causes you to struggle in your faith walk? This is something for you just to ponder for a second. I'm going to give some examples of different things, and I'm hoping that at least a couple of these resonate, because I think at least one or two of these things will resonate with everybody, because it's a common thing that as broken, sinful people, we do end up all struggling with. I think that there's two different categories of areas that we struggle with in our faith walk. Area number one are the things that we're supposed to do, but we're really bad at them. Things like just the consistency of, we know we're supposed to be in the fellowship of other believers. We're supposed to be at church every week and being a part of that. Sometimes that's a struggle to show up. Sometimes we know that we're supposed to dig into the Word, be in God's Word, be in our Bibles daily. It's what the Lord commands, and sometimes that's a struggle to do too. We know that we're supposed to go out and share the love of Christ with everybody because it's love that is for everybody. But sometimes we don't do that. We get uncomfortable trying to talk to other people, or we just don't think about it. That's one category of things, the things that we're supposed to do that we don't do. And then the other category is the things that we're not supposed to do, that we have a hard time giving up. These would be things like the Ten Commandments, when we put other things above God in our lives. Maybe there are times when we're not honoring our parents and other authority figures in our lives. Maybe we're lying and cheating in ways that we don't think about all that much. Maybe there's some other things that are happening, some sin in our life that's causing us some pain or some shame, but we don't know how to overcome it. From these two categories, things that we're supposed to do that we don't do, and things that we're not supposed to do that unfortunately we do too much of, we're all guilty of having a hard time with that, myself included. We all have our own struggles. And that can be tough. But here's the thing. Every single person, not just in this room, not even just in the country, but every single person in the church throughout history over the past 2,000 years has gone through those struggles too. Maybe they're not the exact same struggles each of us have gone through, but we've all struggled with trying to better work in our faith lives and to overcome some of the challenges of our sinful condition. In fact, we know this not just because of, personal anecdotes or through history, but we know it in the Bible as well. There was a group of Jewish believers in the first century after Jesus rose again and ascended that were believers in Christ. They were followers in Christ, they were following his way, and they believed that they were saved through Christ. But because of either discomfort, unfamiliarity, or even just inconvenience in their own life, they chose to walk away from Jesus. They chose to reject what Christ had for them because they wanted to go back to the old ways, the Jewish ways. That's what they were looking for. This is the story of what was being addressed in the book of Hebrews. It was a book that was a letter that was written to this audience of these Jewish believers, and it had one big theme, and that theme was that Jesus is better. I know you want to walk away from Jesus. You think that your old way of life is better, that you're going to find more comfort or more familiarity or more convenience. But I'm telling you, Jesus is better than all of those things. Jesus is better than everything that has come and everything that will ever come after him. Jesus is better than everything. And the book talks about this a lot. It's the main theme. And one example is actually the very, very beginning of this book. You see, at the very beginning of this book, it's being addressed that one of the challenges that these Jewish believers are having is that they know that in the past, God had used different prophets to talk to them. So they were looking for the next prophet. Who's going to be the next prophet that was going to speak for God to lead them through this difficult time? Well, here's what the book says. This is what this letter starts with. It says this: long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets. Makes sense. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, through whom also he created the world. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power. So again, in the past, God used the prophets to speak for him, to kind of tell him what God's plan was. But they're not needed anymore because Jesus is better. Jesus is there. Jesus gets to speak directly as the Son of God, because he is the radiance of the glory of God, the exact imprint of his nature. So why do these Jewish believers need to go back to the prophets when they have Jesus? The book continues to go through different accounts and different examples of ways why Jesus is better, and he's specifically better than everything that happened in the old Jewish system. But through all of that, it all culminates at the end of the book. In chapter 12, it talks about all these things about how Jesus is better, and they talk about how we can focus on other people that have come before us that have also gone through struggles, that have learned to lean on Jesus, and we can use their wisdom, and we can use the wisdom of Jesus in our struggles, but it all focuses on this at the end. Because, and this is kind of a statement talking about it's putting all together all the reasons why we know that because Jesus is better and we can lean on him instead of leaning on other things in our lives that maybe sound more comfortable or more convenient, it gives us this wisdom. It says, because we know that Jesus is better, and because we can trust in his wisdom and in the wisdom of those that have come before us that have also dealt with our same struggles, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin that clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and the perfecter of our faith, who, for the joy that is set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. So again, verse 1, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, because we know that those that have come before us, and we have a history, not just here at Living Christ, but as the global church as a whole, 2,000 years of history of those that have come before us that have also dealt with similar struggles, that we know that we're surrounded by so many great witnesses that we can look back at as heroes in our faith that have become role models, that we can focus on them, that we can lay aside every weight and sin. We don't have to focus on the small details of the inconveniences and the struggles and the discomforts. We can cast those all away, and instead, we can fix our eyes on Jesus as we run this race of life, this faith walk, with endurance. And we know that we can do that when we focus on Jesus as our big picture in our life, because it says that he's the founder and the perfecter of our faith. As we try to overcome our burdens, our struggles, our sin, we know that we don't have to personally worry about that. On our own, we know that's impossible to do, that it's so hard. But when we're looking at Jesus, as the founder and the perfecter of our faith, he's the one who begins this race for us. And he's also the one that's going to finish the race for us. So we know that Jesus has already accomplished everything for us. In fact, Jesus has done so much. He, who for the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross, he despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Jesus endured the cross for us. And that's another reason why Jesus can be added to the great cloud of witnesses, because Jesus also suffered and struggled with so many things the same way that we do, and he endured through it. So we know that if Christ can endure all of those things, he can endure the amazing suffering of the cross. There's so much that we can also endure for his sake, because Jesus has already accomplished everything for us. And that's kind of the point I'm trying to drive home here at the end of, getting closer to the end of this message, is that because we know that Jesus has already accomplished everything, and we know we can focus on him in this race. That's the big picture, and that because of that, we already know we're going to get to the finish line because Jesus has already perfected us. As a body of believers, I know we're all going to be in heaven one day, and that's an amazing, beautiful thing. That's already accomplished for us. The amazing part about that is because we know that that's already accomplished for us, Jesus has already ran this race for us. When we try to accomplish more, to be more effective hands and feet of Christ by overcoming some of our struggles, there's no fear in failure. Christ has already taken care of all of that for us. So we don't have to be afraid of any discomfort or inconvenience because now we get to live our life with purpose. We don't have to worry about trying to accomplish things for ourselves. We actually have a purpose of trying to accomplish things for Christ. See, I think that in our lives, our ultimate goal is to become more like Jesus, to come closer to him. And there's nothing we can do to do that perfectly on our own. Nobody on this planet, other than Jesus himself, has actually made themselves perfect and gotten as close to Jesus as possible. I still have a lot of learning and growing to do. Pastor Todd still has a lot of learning and growing to do. And guess what? Even though we don't necessarily believe in him because we're not Catholics, the Pope still has a lot of learning and growing to do. And if the Pope still has a lot of learning and growing to do, that means there's so much room for all of us to learn and grow. That's our purpose. We can continually grow closer because that's a part of our calling as Christians, to be on our walk with Christ, grow closer with him so we can better serve him and better serve the world as we are to love the world as Christ loved the world. There's this group of guys on YouTube that some of my friends showed me back in college. It's this group of people. They call themselves Yes Theory. And the whole point of this group of young men is that they do these challenges with each other that try to get them outside of their comfort zone. And usually it's kind of social challenges. Sometimes it's fun things. Like they're the kind of guys that will be like, we're going to throw a dart at a map, and wherever it lands, we're going to fly there and do a trip, and they have to do some challenge. But again, the whole point of what they do is to get them outside of their comfort zone. And they have a motto. It's on their shirts, on a lot of their branding, and I love it. It's simply seek discomfort. And I think that's an amazing mantra to have. The mission of seeking discomfort, because when we're inside our comfortable bubbles, inside our comfort zones, we're not growing. And again, because we know that there's no fear in trying, there's no fear in failure with our faith walks because of what Christ has done, we can seek discomfort knowing that there's no downside. We don't have to worry about any discomfort or inconvenience or pain because Christ has already perfected all of that. And we also know that there is going to be some struggling in this life. That's a part of the purpose too. When we pick up our cross to follow Christ, there is some suffering in that. I'm not going to try to lie and say that there isn't. But we know that we can overcome that. We can endure all of that because of what Christ has already endured for us. So we don't have to be afraid to seek discomfort. In fact, I encourage that we seek discomfort. In fact, kind of back on that race analogy that I brought at the beginning, if someone's a runner and they're not going to try to seek any discomfort, they're probably not going to get far in their race. There's going to be some struggle, but sometimes that struggle is worth it in the end to accomplish something amazing. If I decided as a runner at the first moment that I was uncomfortable, that I was a little sore after the first couple miles in a marathon and I decided to give up, I wouldn't have been able to get to the finish line. But when we know what the finish line is, and again, that big picture approach of knowing where the finish line is and knowing that every step I take, no matter if it's comfortable or uncomfortable, it brings me closer to that, that's the goal, that's the focus. And I think as a church, as an individual people and as a church, we can learn to embrace some discomfort for the sake of growing closer to Jesus. One last example analogy before I kind of give us our closing question to think about and ponder for the rest of the week. And again, it still has something to do with kind of athletics and running in a way. And that's the idea of strength training and weight training specifically. It's this idea that the only way you grow and get stronger is by putting stress on your body. If you're like a bodybuilder, the way you get big and strong is by putting stress on your body, by all of the reps and all of the weights and the dumbbells and the barbells and everything. but that can cause some discomfort. That's the stress on your body, but it's that stress that causes that growth. If you don't have that kind of stress on yourself, you're not going to grow, and you're going to stay small. So I think we can encourage each other to seek a little bit of discomfort. And that's, again, my last question for everyone to think about and ponder throughout, either today, this week, this month, this season. My question is this: where have you been too comfortable in your life? And I mean that specifically in your spiritual life, where you could seek discomfort. So I honestly encourage this. I think, what is one area in our spiritual lives that we can try to be a little less comfortable in so we can grow and make that a part of our comfort zone, so we can become more effective followers of Christ in the process? And again, we know that we can do this because Christ has already endured everything for us. Last point again, there's no fear in trying. There's no fear in failure. So we don't have to be afraid to seek that discomfort. So I will leave you with that.